Crime, murder, and bloodshed, it's overtaking our headlines. Criminologist and author Darius Figueroa joins us now to give his perspective on crime and, of course, the changing patterns of criminal activity across the country and how that may be impacted by the migrant population. Darius Figueroa, thank you so much for joining us.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Yes. So, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this supposed debate that has been taking place over the past couple of weeks, crime and race. Do you think there's a relationship between crime and ethnicity, that certain sectors of the society are being targeted?
Well, first things first, we must recognize in Trinidad and Tobago that we have a serious problem now, presently, because social control has collapsed. We continue to focus on crime, but we're not understanding that in a postmodern democracy, you're supposed to socialize people where they willingly police themselves, their behavior. That has now collapsed. And that is why we are now seeing instances in this social order today, what I call a proto-civil war. So that is the first reality that the society has to come to grips with. What has gone wrong with the manner in which we entice people to buy into the values and the ethics of the political system, whereby you willingly tailor your behavior to suit the ethic of the society. That has collapsed. So that is the first point I want to make. The second reality, as usual, everything circulates around the politics of race in Trinidad and Tobago, and everything eventually ends up in the domain of the politics of race, where you're faced with a crisis of social control. And the first thing you want to do now is to explain it on a basis of the politics of race, where you are insisting there is a predator race and there is a victim race. But the research will show, part of which I did and publish on my blog, free for anybody to read, that you have an overwhelming incidence of African and mixed race perpetrators, but the resounding victim of African and mixed race perpetrators are in fact African and mixed race people. That is what the statistics show. So you victimize members of your own race. And if there are other races in the society who insist that they must be insulated from what is going on in the rest of the society, but then they live under delusion. Something wrong. They live in a rabbit hole with Alice. Because you are seeking soft objects that you insist have what you want, and you are going after what you want from these soft objects by any means necessary. There is no holds barred in this engagement. They don't care if you're old, if you're infirm, if you're broken. As long as they are convinced that you have what they want and you are soft, they come at you. Now, we started seeing this trend developing, coming in 2021. We started to see the trend appearing, then it accelerated last year, and now it's a full-blown. Now, what we must understand is that this trend indicates the dramatic change in the way in which the game, the illicit trades in Trinidad and Tobago, is conducting business today. So what you have now is displacement in the game. So you have an influx of people into the game looking for living. You have a new business model that is dominant, and persons who fed before at the middle and bottom levels of the old business model are now displaced. So they are not going to send out 15 and 20 and 25 resumes looking for a job. They are now going to evolve into new ways in which they will appropriate wealth that they want. So the increase in home invasions is an indication to us that there is a new reality in the game on the ground, and therefore it is necessary for us to understand this new game and how it has displaced so many people in the game who are now resorting to home invasions and any form of crimes against property and the person in order for them to continue their lifestyle. And what is going to happen with these home invaders is that they will go and parang the wrong house, and if we do find them, we will find them dismembered. Because the game has its way of dealing with those who break its rules.
So you're saying that, yeah, I mean, we were talking about persons, if they feel that they will be insulated, that's not the case. I think, Darius, correct me if I'm wrong, if you think you're going to be insulated based on ethnicity, you're wrong. But what about class? Because the wealthy have, I mean, they have not, I mean, I'm only reading this morning that there was a home invasion in Victoria Gardens, which happens to be a gated community, but we scarcely see home invasions and these types of attacks on persons in wealthy communities where you have your security guard, you know, you could afford your cameras, you have dogs, you have you're in a gated community and so on.
Yes,
are they insulated?
They are looking for soft targets. That is what they are looking for, soft targets. So the effort that they will have to expend to go after the wealthy, you have to exactly know what you are doing, because they are hard targets. They have been preparing for this day since the 90s.
And they likely probably have licensed firearms just awaiting.
Yes, and they have their estate police on call who respond armed, because they can afford all the requisite security details and all the hardening of their targets to make it very, very difficult for you to breach an assault.
But do you see it like in times to come, like, you know, these miscreants, as we call them, will enter into those wealthy houses and overtake the house, like, you know, what you see in Haiti, what had happened at a point in time in Trinidad, people come into your house and you have to move out. Do you see that happening? Can it happen?
Well, that has been going on in Trinidad and Tobago in the marginalized spaces of Trinidad since the 1990s, where you will have an elderly person living in a house or an elderly couple living in a house, their children are all gone, and they want that house and they simply move in the house. That has been going on since the decade of the 1990s in Trinidad and Tobago. And that, because it was going on in the marginalized urban spaces, it never was headline news. So what is happening now that is headline news has been going on in Trinidad and Tobago in the marginal spaces since the 1990s, and it never was important enough for us to understand this reality and to wring our ears and note that when your neighbor house on fire, wet yours. So that is the reality. So the marginalized spaces from the 1990s has been the laboratory for the methodology that they are now unleashing on the middle class.
Correct. It appears as though the middle class is now being, I don't know if to say targeted, because we're so particular about who's being targeted and who's not, but that is what we can gather from the evidence that is before us. But have you seen the methodology, as you just said, shift? I have been noting that, you know, we're seeing more cases of dismemberment, beheading, execution-style killings. You're seeing heartless, really callous, daylight shootings, murders.
Yes, from 2017 to now, the war between the two contending transnational organized crime business models accelerated and exploded in Trinidad and Tobago. And this war continues. And all of these graphic and explicit acts of criminality are flowing from this war between the business models. So that is the potent indicator to us of what is going on the ground.
It seems South American style, a lot of them, and we're seeing some Venezuelan nationals being killed here. We're seeing them being involved in crimes and so on. You talk to victims and they would tell you, yes, one or two of the perpetrators appear to be Spanish-speaking nationals. How do you believe the influx of Venezuelans to Trinidad and Tobago has impacted crime?
Well, what first thing we must understand is that we don't even have an idea of the quantum of the migrant population living in Trinidad and Tobago, because the borders are so open. It's like a terminus. The illicit boats come in and out at will. So that's the first thing. The second thing we must understand is that this tsunami of migrants that flooded Trinidad and Tobago, that was planned by transnational organized crime. That was not only a business in which they collected US dollars to bring them here, but what happened also is that within this migrant population, which contains not just only Venezuelans, within this migrant population you had functionaries of transnational organized crime who were members of, as they say in Venezuela, the trends or the trains, or as we like to say in Trinidad, gang, who were members of trends, who were affiliated to this brand of transnational organized crime, who came into Trinidad and Tobago to exert control over this migrant population. Because what Trinidad and Tobago must understand, transnational organized crime brought them, and transnational organized continues to exercise power over them. They have a code of silence that is clearly apparent. And what happened, they are here, they were placed in Trinidad and Tobago. They are pursuing the interests of the transnational organized crime group that brought them. And then when the war broke out between the two contending business models, eventually these captains placed in Trinidad passed in the war and were eliminated.
And they...
So in the wars, the Venezuelan migrant population got dragged into the war.
We're still seeing so many murders, Darius. We're seeing so many triple murders, double murders, probably, I estimate probably like a record number. The government has attested this to the prevalence of assault rifles and so on. Assault weapons. Your thoughts on this? I know in one or two cases you may see an innocent bystander being shot and so on, but a lot of the times, for instance, that shooting a couple nights ago in Santa Cruz, it appears as though those 3 persons were targeted.
There is a purpose, and the intent is, one, in specific cases, is to sow terror in a community that you have targeted, in which you intend to take over, to displace who is exercising power over that community and replace them. 2, the latest incarnation now of this strategy is that you are wiping out families involved in the trade that you are targeting to take over the turf that they work on. So it is no longer a targeted removal of a single individual. They are removing families.
As we close, Darius, I mean, we ask you this question very often. Your solutions. What solutions can we go to solve these crimes?
Well, Trinidad and Tobago, from the second half of the 1960s, the Colombian business model set up shop in Trinidad and Tobago. And we continue in 2023 to be in denial over the fact that the entire crime reality of Trinidad and Tobago is driven by developments in transnational organized crime. And right now, from 2017, we are seeing the rivers of blood because of two contending business models, the Colombian and the Mexican. And the Colombians have lost, they are no longer in control, but they simply don't want to surrender and move away. So it will continue until there is enforced peace in the game.
What is enforced peace?
Well, in the game, you enforce peace by dint of bullet. And remember, elements in Trinidad and Tobago only return to the American gun trafficking pipeline to source AR-15s. Because AR-15s became the weapon of desire in the arms race between the two business models.
Darius Figueroa, criminologist and, of course, author. Let me thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
All the best to you, Darius. Well, it's now time for another break. We leave you with this quote, which says, "Stay positive. Some of your best days haven't happened yet." We now go to a quick break. We'll be right back chatting with Opposition Senator Wade Mark.